Lesson number 9, Power of Jesus Part 2. In our last lesson we learned about the power of Jesus in Matthew 8, and today we shall continue to learn about the power of Jesus in Matthew 9. While we review the stories of Jesus' power, we will see that the Gospel accounts are jammed full of marvelous stories about the miracles and teachings of Jesus. Though we can just go over these stories quickly, it is well worth your time to carefully think about all these things that Jesus did, as it will give you not only a view of God's power in Jesus, but also of the heart of God. The first story is of the paralytic man that was brought to Jesus. Jesus recognized the faith of those who brought the man and told him his sins were forgiven. This created a reaction from the Pharisees, for they knew that only God has the right to forgive sins, and because they did not recognize that Jesus was God, they thought he was blaspheming. Jesus proved his power and authority to forgive sins by healing the man in front of them all, thus proving that he was God. When Jesus called Matthew, a tax collector, to be one of his followers, he then joined some tax collectors and sinners for a dinner. And again the Pharisees were upset, for they thought, "How can this man eat with sinners?" Jesus then told them, "The sick need a physician, not those who are well," and said they should go and learn that God desires mercy above sacrifice. Here we get a glimpse into the heart of God, for though God is righteous and hates sin, he is also merciful to sinners and willing to forgive them. When some others asked Jesus why his disciples did not fast as others did, he had to explain that while he was present with his disciples, they would rejoice, but when he was gone from them, they would be sad and then fast. Jesus used some illustrations to teach about his new kingdom in comparison with the old ways of the Jewish law. His kingdom was different than all the rules and regulations that were required by the Jewish law. In his kingdom, men would perform their righteous deeds out of love and joy before God, and not out of a mandatory obligation to dead religion. These two different things could not be mixed. Jesus' teaching and kingdom liberated people from the bondage of the law. If a person tried to mix Jesus' message of grace with the Old Testament law, it would be like a new cloth sewn onto old garments, which would create an even bigger hole in the garment. He also said it would be like putting new wine into old wineskin. When this happens, the new wine would ferment, increasing the gas in the skin and cause the older skin to burst. New wine required new wineskins. What Jesus was saying is that in his kingdom there has to be an entirely fresh start. It would not be mixed with the religious ritualism of Judaism, as that would make it a legalistic system of rules which men can never keep, no matter how hard they might try. But rather it would be a system of grace, whereby sinners could be healed and freely forgiven and walk in loving obedience to the ways of God. Jesus healed a woman with a bleeding disorder while on the way to bring back a young girl who had died. Though he was on an important mission of mercy, he still found time to help this desperate woman and heal her. This also shows the kindness of the Lord to share his power and his time with those who need it, even though he has other concerns to attend to also. Is it not wonderful to know that Jesus always has time for us? Jesus heals 2 blind men and then tells them not to let anyone know about it, but they go about telling everyone about it. They should have listened and obeyed Jesus, but we understand why they could not keep quiet. They had just had such a great thing done for them, a mighty miracle. They could not be quiet. This is what it should be like for those whom the Lord has saved and opened their eyes to his wonderful love and salvation. All who know his gracious healing hand should want to make the gospel known. When Jesus cast out a demon from a man that was mute and gave him back his speech, the Pharisees said he was casting out demons through the power of Satan. This was a rather silly thing to say, for why would Satan tear down his own kingdom? It is clear that the Pharisees were envious of Jesus because he had such power and because the people came flocking to him for his help. They did not enjoy taking a second place to Jesus, so they tried to resist him and speak evil against him. The Pharisees picture for us what the heart of man is like. Because of man's sinful nature, he always wants to take the best place and push others down, so he can get what he wants. But Jesus is not like that at all. We read near the end of this chapter that he went about healing all sicknesses and diseases wherever he went, and preaching to them the gospel of the kingdom. Jesus wanted people to receive God's blessing and to be a part of his eternal kingdom. His mission was not only to heal people, but to preach about God's salvation and forgiveness. When Jesus looked on the crowds, he was moved with compassion for them and saw them as sheep who had no shepherd. He wanted to be their shepherd and be their helper. The message of God's love and grace needs to be spread to the great masses of people in the world, and so Jesus asks us to pray that God would send forth more workers into his harvest. Those who follow Jesus will adopt his compassion for lost mankind and will desire to labor in his field to see many enter into his glorious and eternal kingdom. I hope you are one of his followers, and if not, why not become his follower today by placing your trust in him, asking him to forgive you of your sins. We end our lesson with this quotation. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, be of good cheer, your sins are forgiven you." Matthew chapter 9, verse 2.